right, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get this meeting started. I officially call this meeting of the Board of Water Resources to order. Today is August 10th. We are just a little bit after 1 p.m. at the Department of Natural Resources. It's great to see everyone, and we'll get to this, but we're excited to have a new board member with us, Mike Davis. So welcome, thank you. We'll go ahead and start off with introductions of the board, and then I will ask Director Hassenjäger to share who from her team is with us today. So I'm Juliet Tennert, chairing the Board of Water Resources and representing Lake and Tooele.
I'm Charles Holmgren. I represent the Bear River Basin, Box Elder, Rich, and Cache counties.
Dana Van Horn. I represent Emery, Carvin, San Juan, and Grand counties from Upper Colorado.
Kyle Stevens, Weber River District, representing Davis, Weber, Morgan, and Summit counties.
Blaine Ibsen, representing the Sevier River District.
Mike Davis, representing the Provo River District, Wasatch County, Utah County, Chuab County.
Spencer Jones, representing the Lower Colorado River Basin.
Great, thank you. And before going to Director Hassenjäger, I'll just note that Randy Crozier is excused today, and we'll look forward to seeing him at the next meeting.
Thank you. My name is Candace Hassenjäger, Director at Water Resources, and with us today we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, Ani Baynard, Russell Hadley, Tom Cox, Laura Vernon, Marty Bushman from the AG's office. Thanks for being here, Marty. Randy Staker, Shannon Klaus doing our minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And our AV team and behind the curtain doing all the hard work to make sure this meeting is possible is Carmen McDonald and Seth Major. So appreciate them as well.
Thank you. And we just appreciate all of your support and the work that you do for us. A couple of just minor changes to the agenda. First on the agenda, we have the oath of office for our new board member, Mike Davis. We actually did that during the briefing meeting. Director Ferry was available then. And so we've taken care of that oath of office. And like I said, just welcome to Mike Davis. And we're very excited to have you. And then also the very last agenda item is a closed session for the discussion of purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property when public discussion would prevent the authority from completing the transaction on the best possible terms. We've consulted with our Attorney General, and we've recognized that we actually do not need to go into closed session for this discussion. And so we will keep this as an agenda item, and we will have that discussion on real property, but we will do that just within the session that we're in right now. So those two minor changes to note. And then with that, why don't we just jump into the agenda, and we need to do an approval of some minutes. I know that we talked about these minutes in our briefing meeting. Would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I find the minutes to be in good order and would make a motion that we approve the minutes from previous board meeting.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we've got a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chair, I'll abstain since I wasn't here.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll note that for the record. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Bear River Commissioner report. And I understand that our state engineer will be sharing that with us. Great. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. So I pulled together a presentation. It's not necessarily just focused on the Bear River Commission, but some updates that I think would be helpful for the area as well that we're working on in the state engineer's office. So I'll go ahead and get started. First of all, let me just talk about some current conditions, and maybe do I need to introduce myself? So Teresa Wilhelmsen, State Engineer and Director of the Division of Water Rights. So let's just talk about some of the current conditions. That's what I've called this slew of information as to what's going on. And I think some of these items will be of interest, or at least put it on the radar for the Board of Water Resources. Most of you, or those in the Bear drainage, know that Idaho is commencing their general adjudication on the Bear River. That is definitely something that Utah should pay attention to. They've set up an area office there in Preston, Idaho, which is just across the border. And they're actively sending claims, sending notice, and taking claims. For the Utah port or adjudication, just to give you an update, so we did finish most of the Utah adjudication. However, we didn't ever adjudicate the claims or take claims for Bear Lake itself for the Pacific Core claims. So with Idaho doing the adjudication now, we actually are dedicating resources through the state engineer's office to finish the Utah adjudication as well, so that both states are working together and that we don't end up in 10 years Utah coming in after Idaho is finished and trying to tie in. So we're actively doing that to make that coordination happen, which will be good. We do have a goal of finishing the Bear River adjudication, which is a pretty large area, by 2030. So we're going to start setting out some goals, work through some objections that we received, and take those final claims too. So just wanted to bring that to your awareness. Also, we've entered into, the Utah State Engineer and the Wyoming State Engineer have entered into a joint distribution agreement on a small tributary called Mill Creek. It is in the Bear River drainage. It's at the very top part of the system in Summit County. The flow is typically about 32 feet, pretty small creek. But we did have Wyoming assert a priority call on Utah on that system, which could have shut all Utah users off if that priority call had gone through. So we worked with them last year, identified the issues of the Utah water rights, which deal with feudal call. We believe that there's also import water up in that area that shouldn't be subject to a priority call. So there's a few water right elements that we needed to make sure were understood before we did cut off users. So we entered into an agreement a year ago. We renewed that agreement this year because we're actively studying the area, and we've installed some measuring devices so that we can understand what the system is doing. One other element to that, just this week, we're going to be working on a stream gauge that will be on a private property in Wyoming. Now that works for Wyoming to get access to that, but the Utah State Engineer can't go on Wyoming property. So we'll be working out a joint access agreement so that both the Wyoming State Engineer's office and the Utah State Engineer's office can have access to that gauge. So we're doing that, and I think I'll be getting that agreement in the next couple weeks. So, but actively working, we had staff up there today installing one of the last gauges on Mill Creek in Utah. So there's a couple little just tidbits of current conditions for Bear Lake this year. Current elevation, I think this is as of today, is about 59.16. It peaked at 59.17. Last year, the low was 59.07. So Bear Lake rose over 7 feet this year. Pretty incredible to have that happen. They started the deliveries, my understanding, on June 25th, and the pumps were turned on July 14th. So just kind of brief little operational items there for you to be aware of on some of the deliveries. So let me talk about the transition. So with the bill that did pass this session, the Utah State Engineer became chair of the Utah Commission. We have worked with, and we've had a meeting with water rights staff and water resources staff, and we are implementing kind of the transition. Candace is still going to serve on the management committee with me, so she'll still be involved in those management operations. And then for the technical advisory committee, it's a committee that works through a lot of the technical issues that they bring to the commission and the management committee. And Blake Bingham with my office, my deputy, is going to lead the Utah delegation on the TAC, but Jake Sarago, Skylar, I think Candace wanted to be on that too, will be part of that technical advisory committee and will coordinate those efforts. We still are looking to Randy Staker to be the treasurer position, so Randy will still do that. And then we still plan the Utah delegation to meet like we have been, so no changes there. So we're working on that. I think for the November meetings, which I'll put up the dates here in a minute, that will be the first kind of visual of the new change, but the TAC will be working up to that point. So that's the plan. So part of that bill as well, and I wanted to make sure that the Board of Water Resources was aware of this. That bill also made the state engineer commissioner to the Columbia River Compact. And as we started trying to plug into that compact work, we actually found out that there is no Columbia River Compact. It was never ratified. So Congress didn't ratify it. The only two states that did any ratification was Utah and Nevada in their statutes. Oregon and Washington, who you would think would be the ones that would really want to do it, never did. So Nevada also repealed that section of their code about 3 years ago. And so this Monday at the Legislative Water Development Commission, I just put out a policy consideration for the legislature to potentially repeal this section, the Columbia River Compact section of Utah Code as well, since there is no compact that it describes in that section of code. One good thing about this whole thing is there has been a Clear Creek State Engineers distribution system on that creek for decades. So we know what the water deliveries are, how much water is there. It's been tracked this entire time through a distribution system that we have with the State Engineer's Office. So I wanted to bring that also to the board's attention of that status. I do think Representative Tom Peterson up there in Box Elder is willing to potentially do a bill file to do this. So if you have concerns or questions, please reach out to me and let me know. So we'll see where that ends up. Let me just talk a bit about state engineers' efforts for measurement, which apply. Some of these do apply statewide, and so for some of your other areas as well. We're trying to move from the pallet system that's pictured there to a little bit more precise measurement, but we really have improved. We hired a new program manager over our measurement and telemetry, and many of you may know Aaron Hunt. He is actually leading that program now, and he is, we're buying equipment and we're frantically and very diligently getting a lot more measurement and telemetry installed all across the state. We have been focusing in the Bear River drainage for a lot of the measurements, but we're also focusing Colorado River as well as other areas. So you'll see us really progress in getting real-time measurement installed. This next couple weeks, or probably in the next month, we actually are going to be installing a gauge at the Bear River Refuge. Aaron, it'll probably take him about a day to do that. We're waiting for the permit. If anyone would like to see that installation, we'd be happy to accommodate that. So just let us know. We don't have a date set, but we can set a date. We just need to get it in, but we could set a date to accommodate some schedules if that's of interest. And it is going to be not a normal and a pretty complicated installation. The other one is Mill Creek, like I mentioned. We are getting those devices. I think they're up there today, installing the last device up there. So one of the performance measures that the State Engineer's Office, Division of Water Rights, is likely to have this year is percent of systems telemetered. which means we're going to be very aggressive in getting systems metered and measured and reporting automatically. So you'll see a lot more of that. We've got about 40 systems across the state, including the Bear. We've still got some measurements we need to do there. So we'll be actively doing that. And then creating these distribution and counting models that we're working on. I know we're trying to do a beta test on the severe at this point, but we'll have some other systems as well. So you'll see that. And then we're aggressively pursuing this water right network to get more transparency and clarity to the water right records. We haven't focused on the Bear River drainage yet, but we are working out in the Colorado drainages at this point to do that. And I think a message that all of you can share with your constituents in your areas is, contact us early and contact us often so that we can make sure that we understand who owns what water rights and that they're being used accurately. We're finding a lot of water rights. Title's not updated, and they're not even in the place where they're supposed to be. So we're just trying to get better records there. One other update, which applies to all of the drainages of the Great Salt Lake, but especially for the Bear River, is the governor's proclamation that was issued this year. So I just wanted to give you an awareness of that if you haven't heard of it. The governor, at the recommendation of the state engineer, did close all of the Great Salt Lake areas to new appropriations, and that will remain closed. It can be relifted, but we've been doing public meetings in each of these areas. I know Charles was at our Box Elder meeting. We've had meetings in Cache. We've met with county councils and others to talk through how much really is appropriated of these systems, what water rights are there, paper water rights are in the area. For example, Cache County on paper, there's about 2 million acre feet on water rights that we need to make sure we understand what those are. Part of this proclamation was that the state engineer needs to give a report to the governor and the legislature by November. So we're actively working to prepare that report, and we'll give that by the beginning of November. So wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And this is the last slide. I don't know even how many minutes I had. Okay. So last slide, commission meetings. The next meetings are November 13th and 14th of this year is when the Bear River Commission will again meet. Part of one of the items that the Technical Advisory Committee, is going to be working on is our procedures for interstate water delivery, kind of how to handle a priority call on a commission level. So that's one of the things that the TAC will be working on during the summer and before the next commission meeting. And then I just wanted to give an update, the state engineer's distribution and counting model that is used along with Idaho's model for the deliveries. We actually moved that out of the old system, and it is operating now under the new technology that we have for distribution and counting models. We started using it last year and are using it this year. And it seems to be working pretty well. So with that, that's all I was going to bring to the group, and happy to answer questions, and just thank you for inviting me to come present.
Thank you very much. It was a great update. Good information. We appreciate that. Are there any questions for the state engineer?
Question, Madam Chair, or comment, or both. Commissioner Wilhelmsen, I think it's of note that the regional engineers have changed in the Logan office, that Will Atkin has retired, and I believe Skylar Buck is the
Yes.
new regional engineer. Is that correct?
Yes, he is. Yep. And so we've had actually another change that is occurring. Will Atkin did retire after 34, oh my goodness, I can't even remember now.
Big numbers.
40-something years. So Will did retire, and Skylar Buck is his replacement. He is recruiting right now for an assistant regional engineer in that office up there in Logan. So we have that change. In our Weber regional office, we actually are losing our regional engineer, Gary Brimley. He's taken a position with Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and so we'll be recruiting for his position in our Weber office. So, yeah, some
Another
changes there.
question for you, Commissioner. Access to the new model, is that easy, or is that,
Yep.
does it come out piecemeal? I get the one from Idaho weekly, and I've seen the Utah model once, but I don't exactly understand how to access it.
Yeah, so it is on our website. What might be happening was that transition from Will to Skylar, that we're a little bit delayed on that to get that out, those reports out. But it is on our website, and you can access it from there. And I'm happy after to kind of show you how to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe one other change, Price Office. So we did promote our assistant regional engineer, Cash, into a different position. So Mark is recruiting for a new assistant regional engineer in our Price Office. I know you've worked with them before. So he is doing our water rate network. So he's still down in Price, but a different job. So. Yes, we did. I know. Yep. So anyway, thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda are some projects, and so we'll start out with the feasibility reports. RE 468 Liberty Pipeline Company. Ani is going to give us or share that with us, and I guess as she's coming up, this is in Kyle Stevens' area. Kyle, do you want to set this up for us? Great.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the briefing meeting, I had the opportunity to visit with Tom and Ani and the engineer from JUB, Nate Smith, and the representatives from the pipeline. Wow, it seems like it's been a long time ago. Been a couple of months ago. But anyway, so yeah, we'll just let Ani go ahead and explain the project. And do we have the online people coming? Will they be available?
Yeah, it sounds like, let me make sure that I'm right on this. We have Jamie Haddock, who's president online, and then Nathan Smith from JUB is here with us. Thank you. That's totally fine, yeah.
I'm here on behalf, well, first of all, good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the board. I'm here to present on behalf of Liberty Pipeline Company. The proposed project is located in Liberty, about 10 miles northwest of Huntsville in Weber County. The applicant provides culinary water to approximately 679 connections, and the water is obtained from 2 springs and 2 wells. It's stored in four tanks with a combined capacity of 1.1 million gallons. So the problems that the applicant is having is a pressure zone issue. The applicant has 2 main pressure zones, the south zone and the north zone. The north zone is currently fed by a spring that is susceptible to drought conditions. In 2018, the spring nearly went dry, and the applicant was faced with considering an emergency connection to a neighboring system or trucking in water. The applicant also experiences about 30% loss in their system, primarily to leaks in the existing 6-inch distribution pipe. So the applicant received a $1.5 million plus Water Smart grant. It's a drought resiliency grant from the Bureau of Reclamation, and they are requesting financial assistance from the board to build a booster pump station and transmission line to boost flows from the south zone to the north zone. The building will include a booster pump station and a meeting room. Currently, they are working out of pretty much a tough shed, so this would be a big step up for them, for their company. The transmission line includes more than 11,000 feet of 8-inch PVC pipe. This will allow the applicant to move water from the south zone to all the pressure zones in the system. The applicant also plans to replace 8,000 feet of existing 6-inch pipe with 8-inch PVC pipe to improve the fire flow conditions as well as reduce water leaks. The staff recommends the board authorize 60.8% of the project cost up to $3,293,000, and that the project be purchased at a 2.95% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $188,100. That is staff's report.
Thank you. Before we go to questions from the board, I'll just give the opportunity to President Hadlock or Nathan, if you'd like to share anything with the board.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hadlock. We appreciate being able to be here and what you've done for us. The only thing I would ask is if it is possible at all, is to have a little bit better terms on this loan. You know, this is a really small water company with, as she said, you know, under 700 shareholders. We're nonprofit. We're all volunteers who serve on the board. And this was originally just an agricultural community. It hasn't been until, you know, the last 10, 20 years, a lot of really wealthy people have moved up here, and it's really played with our average median. But I need to keep these water monthly bills as low as I can for the older folks that are here, and there's a lot of people up here that don't have that kind of money. So anyway, anything you can do to help out with making sure these terms are as good as they can get, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As far as the other questions, I'm going to let Nate answer the pipeline questions.
Great, thank you. President, I will tell you that we talked to staff a little bit about this earlier, and just to kind of understand the calculations, we have board guidelines, which I'm sure that they've shared with you, and just to talk to staff, you know, to understand some of the calculations they went to, and we asked them to really sharpen their pencils and take a look to see if there's, you know, any flexibility here. I will say, and I'm looking at Ani and looking at Shalene and Marisa, I will say that we did our best to see if we could, you know, kind of have a bit of flexibility, and we weren't able to arrive at numbers that would lead us to making changes to the conditions that are here per our guidelines. But of course, we can have a conversation about this. Are there any questions of the board or further comment or follow-up?
Madam Chair, and given the request to consider, I recognize there's probably not a lot that we could do with the interest rate. In fact, it wouldn't be able to do anything with the interest rate, but is there a possibility of some consideration for extending the years from 25 to 30? That would give them a little bit of a break. I think it would reduce the payments from 188 down to 166,000, which is roughly $21,000 a year. That's probably the extent to which we could have some consideration based on President Hadlock's request for, you know, some financial consideration.
Are there any comments or questions about that?
And I guess as I would pose that question back to Jamie, if that is something that could be considered, or you would want to consider, or if you'd want to leave it the way it is, given the fact that we can't do anything with the interest rate, but the years of repayment could be considered.
That would be helpful. Under some wild circumstance that we were able to pay this off earlier, there wouldn't be any penalties for paying off earlier than whatever time was allowed, correct?
Financial people are indicating that
That's
would
correct.
not, that there would not be any prepayment penalty.
That's correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yes, that would be helpful.
Madam Chair, I had a question more for Nate Smith, I think. I was a little concerned about whether the diameter of the pipe being 8-inch from the true pressure zones that are called transmission lines of 11,000 feet, is 8-inch going to be adequate for future growth, or how do you look at that?
So we looked at the flow rate for existing when it goes in, as well as a 30-year growth. And based on the velocities that we'll see, the 8-inch does suffice for both of those flow conditions. Even in an emergency condition, if we had to, our plan right now is to only run one booster at a time. If we did have to run them both, it would still be sufficient to provide the flows we need.
Thank you.
I maybe would just ask staff if, if the board were to a place where we were to consider extending the terms by 5 years, is that amount that Board Member Stevens alluded to accurate, approximately $166,000 per year? Okay. 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 Board Member Ibsen, did you have a comment?
That was exactly my
Okay,
question.
Great. Well, are there any other questions or comments of the board? Before I go looking for a motion, I just want to double check with Randy Staker. Was there any online or electronic public comment on this particular case? Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I would be looking for a motion then.
Madam Chair, I would like to make that motion. And the motion would be that the board authorize 60.8% of the project cost up to $3,293,000, and that the project be purchased at 2.95% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $167,000.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Moved by Board Member Stevens, second by Board Member Jones. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, we'll rule that that motion passes, and we've approved the project with those amended terms. So congratulations, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have a couple of committal of funds. Project RM036 Mayfield Irrigation Company is in Sanpete. Marisa is going to be presenting this, and as she's getting her stuff up, Board Member Blaine Ibsen, do you have any context that you would like to present?
This Mayfield Irrigation Company, and they, as a host of others, have done, are in the process of installing secondary meters on their secondary water system. And so it's been, the feasibility was approved. This is just the final step there of committing of funds for the secondary meter type project, of which we've done several.
Great, thank you very much. And I will just note that Garrick Wilden, the engineer, is online.
Yes.
So Marisa.
And I don't think anyone's with Garrick because nothing has changed since authorized. The company does not need to be present. So as Blaine indicated, this is for the committal of funds just for the loan. The grant portion has already been authorized and committed. Staff recommends the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $253,000 and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $18,300.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Marisa or Garrick? Any comments? Well, if not, I would be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $253,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $18,300.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Board Member Ibsen. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, seconded by Board Member Stevens. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, that committal of funds for RM036 has been approved. Moving on to RE460, Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company. Tom Cox will be presenting this, and this is in Board Member Kyle Stevens' area. Would you like to provide any context as Tom's coming up?
Well, again, this is just more of Davis, Weber Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company ongoing projects for converting their open canal system to box culverts. So
Great.
next phase of their long-range plan.
Great, thank you. Would like to recognize that we have Rick Smith, a general manager, with us, so thank you for joining us. Tom?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the Davis-Weber Counties Canal Company provides both agricultural and M&I water to the areas in Davis and Weber County, obviously, as their name suggests. Their main venue of providing water is the Davis and Weber Canal, which the company has received funding throughout the years for improvements on the canal, and they do have a master plan which sets out every segment of the canal, and they have a plan to make improvements, and once they get finished, they probably start over. Back in December, the board authorized funds for a segment of canal to enclose the 1,400 feet with precast box culvert. So they're here today for the board to consider committing the funds for that. That section of canal, the cost estimate is $3.2 million. They've obtained a Water Smart grant for about $1.4 million. And so staff is recommending today that the board commit 47.8% of the project cost up to $1,530,000, and that the project be purchased at 2.1% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $69,300. So that's the staff's report on that. Just maybe a comment on, you just saw Liberty that had 2.95% interest, and Davis Weber were recommending 2.1% interest. For a while now, the board's been basing the target interest rate on a bond index. So when this project was authorized, the bond interest rate was a little bit further lower, and now it's gone up. So that explains the difference between those two. So that's staff's report.
Thank you, Tom. Before we go to the board for questions, Mr. Smith, do you have any comment you'd like to share? Thanks for being here in person.
No, just thank you again for your assistance.
Any questions or comments?
I think there was one question that came up in our briefing meeting, Rick, and that is, has the $1.4 million Water Smart grant been secured?
Yes, we do have that agreement in place.
Great. Any questions or comment? I'll just double check with Randy Staker. Did we receive any electronic comment on this one? No. Okay. With that, I would be looking for a motion then.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make that motion, and that is motion that the board commit 47.8% of the project cost up to $1,530,000, and that the project be purchased at 2.1% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $69,300. That's my motion.
Thank you. Motion from Board Member Stevens. Is there a second?
Madam Chairman, I'll second the
All
motion.
right. Seconded by Board Member Ibsen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right. That committal of funds for RE460 has been approved. Thank you. Thank you.
Just as Rick is leaving, a good thing, based on Tom's earlier observation of the interest rate, it's a good thing you came in early. You saved a few percentage points in interest. Okay.
Thank you. All right. So next we have a special item. It's an authorization and committal of funds. RE471 Woodland South Hills Irrigation Company. Russell Hadley will be presenting this one to us, and I will note that we have Jason Smith, President, here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us in person, President. And then also online we have Matt Hartvisken, who is the engineer, and Tom Ross, vice president. Thank you. All right, Russell.
Madam Chair, members of the board. Okay, this Woodland South Hills Irrigation Company, located just outside of Woodland. The applicant currently serves culinary water to 47 residential connections. A total of 78 lots will be connected to the culinary system at build-out. All 78 lots are sold, of which 31 undeveloped lots are on standby. On average, 3 of the undeveloped lots are developed per year. 2 wells previously provided culinary water, and storage is held in a 160,000 gallon tank. Culinary water rates are $40 for the first 7,000 gallons, then 0.9 cents per gallon up to 15,000 gallons, then 1 cent per gallon above 15,000 gallons. Secondary water is also provided to 31 of the 47 connections by an unpressurized canal system with water obtained from Bench Hollow Creek. All of the lots are charged a basic assessment annually of $1,425 for the secondary system. The lots that use secondary water are also charged fees for their use. Of the applicant's 2 wells, one of the wells, the mountain well, was required to be taken offline by the Division of Drinking Water because it was only grouted to 25 feet. Culinary wells are required to be grouted to at least 100 feet. The second well, the river well, is currently their sole supply of culinary water. Because the 2 wells only produce 40 gallons per minute each, the applicant installed a new well to add more supply for the future. The new well, the bench well, also produces 40 gallons per minute. The bench well needs to be fitted with a pump house, booster pump, electrical, SCADA controls, and piping to tie to the system. The project also includes refurbishing the mountain well, including regrouting the well and adding a more modern SCADA system. The applicant is requesting funding from the board to refurbish the mountain well and modernize the SCADA controls and pump. The project also includes constructing a pump house and installing about 1,900 feet of pipeline to add the new well to the system. The SCADA system at the storage tank will also be updated. Construction of the project would begin immediately. Engineering services are being provided by Jones & Associates Consulting Engineers. Okay, and we'll show you a few pictures. Here is the new bench well. It's somebody's dog. And the well is capped. It's ready to go. And that produces 40 gallons a minute. This would be the mountain well up on the mountain. And didn't have pictures of the inside. And this is the river well. This is down by the river.
I didn't know you wanted pictures of the inside. I apologize. I will say that on my last, I'm also the certified operator of this system. So on my last inspection, my sanitary inspection this last spring is when I was informed that I have a very nice looking system, well maintained it was built in the 90s. So this is building the remainder of the system out.
Okay, benefits of this project are construction of the new well and pump house will add to the culinary system, add culinary supply to the system, as well as provide more redundancy with a third source. Refurbishing the existing mountain well will bring the well up to drinking water standards and allow it to be added back onto the system. Adding upgraded telemetry SCADA controls to the system will make it more efficient to operate. And also, as we discussed in briefing meeting, this will also help with fire suppression, more fire protection. Okay, the recommended cost sharing and repayment are project total cost of $726,000, with the board providing 85% or $617,000. The applicant would provide $109,000 for their 15% cost share. Staff recommends the board authorize and commit 85% of the project cost up to $617,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $20,600. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for being here with us in person today. Do you have any further comment or context that you'd like to add before we go to board questions?
No, other than I'm very relieved that the 0% is there because, as someone expressed in a previous meeting, we just barely paid off a $715,000 loan per pump and take line, and I have many older residents who are saying, we were told we wouldn't have to pay any more on this water system. You know, but how do you explain that we're a growing community and we have to, Division of Drinking Water requires us to increase our pumping capacity. So, yeah, we're extremely grateful for this.
Great, thank you. Just to double check with Randy Staker, was any public comment, did any public comment come in on this electronically? Okay, he's saying no. Thank you very much. Does the board have any questions for the applicant or for Russell? All right. Well, with that, we'd be looking for a motion, and this is in our new board member, Mike Davis's area. So would you be willing to make that motion for us?
Yes, Madam
Thank
Chair, I'm willing to make a motion. I propose that the board authorize and commit 85% of the project cost up to $617,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $20,600.
Great, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second to the
All right,
motion, Madam
seconded
Chair.
by Board Member Holmgren. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and the authorization and committal of funds for RE 471 has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along. Next on our agenda is a report on integrated water planning in the Great Salt Lake Basin, and we have Laura Vernon here. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate this report today.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Board members, Madam Chair, my name is Laura Vernon. I am the Great Salt Lake Basin Planner with the Division of Water Resources, and I'm excited to talk to you today about an invigorating project we've been working on over the last 6 months that's captivated my attention. So I'll share some of that with you today. Talking about captivating attention, the Great Salt Lake has captivated people's attention over the last couple of years. This image is probably one that you have seen, just really highlighting why I'm here to talk to you today about this project, but also just the long-term declining trends in water levels in Great Salt Lake. In 1986, you have the high of 4211. Last year, for the second year in a row, we reached a historic low of 4188.5. This difference in about 25 feet is significant, and it has, with the decrease, has come a decrease in ecological function, economic revenue, problems with air quality. So, like I said, it's captivated the attention, and it prompted the legislature to put some funding towards this integrated plan that I'll tell you about today. So, just kind of articulated why we need the plan from a Great Salt Lake perspective, but here I'm talking to you today about not just getting water for the Great Salt Lake, but for getting water to all of the water uses in the Great Salt Lake Basin. So as you could see from the image above, the water resources, or previously, the water resources in the Great Salt Lake Basin are stressed. We can see that with the decreasing Great Salt Lake levels. There's been a lot of studies and plans that have looked at the Great Salt Lake or looked at the Bear River Basin or the Weber, but not something that is looking at the system collectively. There's no consensus on what's the story, what data are we using? Is the Bear River Water Conservancy District uses a certain tool. The Jordan River Water Conservancy District uses a different tool to measure, collect data, and there's no one agreed upon tool to answer the questions about supply and demand in the Great Salt Lake Basin. So like I said, this is initiatives may have been taken in one basin, but not in the, at a basin-wide level. So here we are, and we need a tool that will help us make decisions. If we understand what the trade-offs are for decreases in water use in certain areas, we'll be armed with that knowledge and we can make decisions accordingly. And we need a vision, kind of letting people know where we're headed. What are our priorities for the Great Salt Lake Basin? How would we like to see water used? And then many people over the last year or two have been coming to us asking for directions and actions. How can we help? What can we do? What are some tools that we could improve upon to understand the water in the lake and then to deliver water where it needs to go? So this plan is an ambitious plan that hopes to answer all of those questions. Along came HB 429 in the year in 2022 by Representative Miles, and specifically we're tasked with implementing and integrating a surface and groundwater assessment for the entire Great Salt Lake watershed. Two key elements are that we develop a water budget for the entire basin and that we engage the stakeholders throughout the basin. Right now, we're working on a work plan, which is like the instruction manual for the plan itself, and that will be due, a draft of that will be due in November 2023, and a final plan in 2027. And one exciting opportunity that I have to share about this plan is that federal agencies have also expressed an interest in their involvement and becoming involved with Great Salt Lake and the Great Salt Lake Basin, and they've stepped up to the plate and they say, I want to contribute and I want to understand the system better and I want to figure out how to solve this challenging problems of a sustainable Great Salt Lake. So the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the Army Corps of Engineers have invested significant funds from their pocketbooks. And so we have developed this enormous kind of project, the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, which is kind of it's a blending of several different projects. So ultimately, the plan will assess current and surface groundwater supplies in the Great Salt Lake Basin. We'll understand what the future water demands are given current climate scenarios, population, investigate potential benefits of forest management and watershed restoration actions, coordinate efforts to quantify the demand, identify and evaluate best practices to ensure a reliable water supply. And then we're going to take those best practices and kind of run them through a trade-off scenario to understand what the impacts would be to the different communities and systems if we were to implement, or if there was less water to go around, what would the impacts be to the different systems, agriculture, industry, and ecosystems. And then finally, we're going to recommend actionable strategies that will help us achieve a holistic management of the water resources in the Great Salt Lake. And the goal is to ensure a resilient water supply, not only for Great Salt Lake, but for the uses throughout the entire watershed. And as I noted, the bill requires stakeholder coordination. This project could not be done alone with the Division of Water Resources and or together with a consultant. We need an army, we need a village to tackle this problem. And so here you kind of see the one of the organizational structure of the group that we have tasked, or that is tasked to solve this problem. The new Great Salt Lake Commissioner, Brian Steed, is overseeing the program. We are leading this program with the Bureau of Reclamation as they are putting funds together for the basin study. And along the side, you have plenty of state agencies. At the bottom, we have the working groups from the different basins. These could also be at some point connected to the conservancy districts, the watershed councils that are happening, the formation of the watershed councils, and then universities. And then we have several different advisory groups, councils, tech teams that are all working on Great Salt Lake issues as well. Anyway, so to tackle this problem and to understand it holistically, we are looking at several different things in the basin. And there are 6 of them. There are 6 building blocks: water supply, water demand, water quality, watersheds, and stormwater. So and then Great Salt Lake needs. How much water do all these resources need, and how can we make sure that, you know, water quality is not impaired, that the watersheds are healthy. This is just some language from the bill talking about the best management practices that we're going to identify to achieve our objectives. And then, as I mentioned before, the trade-off analysis to avoid deterioration of agricultural, industrial, and our ecosystems in the basin. And it cannot be ignored that given the increased popularity in Great Salt Lake issues, there's a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and we want to make sure that this plan builds on the strength of all of these other projects that are going on. We have the new Watershed Enhancement Trust that USGS has put in a significant amount of money to study saline lakes throughout the West. We have the Great Salt Lake Strike Team coming up with innovative solutions to help protect the lake. So making sure that we're all working together with these groups. And then just to throw in a couple more, the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has a comprehensive management plan revision process for the lake specifically. And I mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers has several $1 million allocated towards the Great Salt Lake Recovery Program, thanks to Mitt Romney. So understanding what all of these programs are and how we can play off the strengths of each one of them is key. And this is, I just mentioned the timeline a little bit before. This is just a snapshot of where we're at. We're gathering data right now, identifying where the gaps are in the data, what tools could we use. This is like I said, it's the work plan for the plan. Plan's so big, we need this kind of introductory plan. So that'll be done and perhaps brought to you all in November or later this year for review if you're interested. And then we'll have throughout 2024, 26, these collaborative initiatives with the steering committees, the advisory groups will continue. We'll start to prioritize projects, identify the tools that need to be developed. We'll get to work on the technical pieces. And then in the meantime, we know that there is interest for short-term actions. We know that there are kind of issues that need to be solved right now, and these are ones that we can go ahead and get to work on before the final plan comes out with action items in early 2027. So, and just so finally, when the plan does come out, the final piece will be a recommendation. So after all of this time, we've done all these trade-off analysis. What are the things that we can recommend to the state that could help bring water to all? If that's legal and policy actions, educational opportunities, infrastructure actions, additional economic or additional monitoring and research, we'll have kind of our marching orders ready to go for the next decade or so. So with that, that's all I have. I'm happy to entertain questions, and if you have any questions or comments down the road, don't hesitate to reach out.
That was a really excellent update. Thank you. It was nice to see it all in one place. And I mean, obviously integrated is in the name, but the integration is so important, and the coordination amongst all of these different stakeholders is so important. And thank you for sharing with us kind of in visual form all that's going into this. Does the board have any questions or comments for Laura? It's a big job, and we just appreciate you keeping us, connected and making sure we know how we can all be of assistance.
Usually when I talk to people, they say, great job and good luck. So.
Yeah. I know. I wish we could just say good luck, but we all have to be part of this.
Yeah, no, we're plugging along, and it's going well. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Great. Let's go ahead and move on. Next, we are going to take a look at the capital asset management plan rules. This is something that I think we've actually talked about in board meeting before, and Shalane has shared a draft of these via email, and we've had some opportunity to review them. So we need to take formal action, and Shalane will set this up for us, please.
Yep. And I didn't actually get out of that. I'll do that in a minute. I don't actually have a presentation for you, just what's in your board folder. You've all seen the rules as they've been prepared. As a reminder, in 2022, the legislature passed House Bill 269, which created new requirements for capital asset management plans. 4 different water providers, wastewater service providers, retail water suppliers, and water conservancy districts with an annual operating budget of $5 million or less. And then it directed different boards, different agencies to create rules for those different organizations. And it is the responsibility of the Board of Water Resources to monitor those plans and come up with rules for those plans for the water conservancy districts with an annual operating budget of $5 million or less. So that is what we have done. We came to you with draft rules several months ago. There were some comments at that time. We received other comments from some of these districts concerned about the cost of preparing this plan, the time to prepare this plan, and we're already in the process of getting funding from you. Is this going to stop that? So we made some modifications to the rules, essentially stating that now this plan can be considered a part of a project if you're coming to the board for funding. So that's what we've created. We've got some definitions in here, explained what has to be in the plan, when it will have to be submitted to the division, and how it will fit into their progress. So staff recommends that the board adopt the rules as written. Any questions?
Thank you. Great. Look, doesn't seem like there's any questions, but just to double check, it sounds like I don't think anyone is here to make public comment in person.
No.
And then we'll double check with Randy, any electronic comment come in on this, and he's saying no. Okay. And I know that we had a couple of questions in our briefing meeting, so thanks for answering those for us, Shalane. Seeing no questions, I would be looking for a motion to approve.
I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the capital asset management plan rules as written.
Great. All right. Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
All right. We have moved to approve by Board Member Van Horn with a second by Board Member Davis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, those rules are approved. Thank you. And thanks Shalane and Marty for all of the work on that. I'm glad to see those moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have an update by Emily Lewis on the statutory water banking, and we'll also need to look at the possible or potential approval of an application and guidelines. But let's go ahead and start with the update from Emily. Thanks for joining us.
All right, everyone. Let the AV team know that there's. Okay, we have a new laptop connected, so you can. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, you guys.
It's nice to see you guys. I feel like it's been a while. All right. So today, I just kind of wanted to give you a quick update on kind of where we are on the water banking project, most specifically to talk about the statutory water bank application guidelines, because that's kind of like one of the last pieces of our regulatory approvals that we are kind of working on for the project. But before we do that, we are rounding out soon to be the end of the 3rd year of this project, which is crazy to think about. And so we anticipate kind of closing things up by your October board meeting and giving like the broad overview of everything. And we have a kind of a rollout of activities, including you guys will get an advanced copy of the draft report to comment on and think about before we kind of distribute the information to the broader community. But we have been slowly plugging away on a bunch of different activities. The last couple times I talked to you, I primarily focused on our activities for the contract water banks, which was the Price Water Bank. We had a really great discussion about a year and a half ago about that particular process. Since then, you know, our original 3 pilots didn't result in a water bank that fit the statutory water bank model. And so what I'm here today to talk to you about is that we have a lucky 4th one that came in at the last minute that's going to be a fantastic example for our statutory water banks. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the forms for those, but just real quickly so you can kind of see where we are. We've been working really hard with the Division of Water Resources staff. So I don't know, Summer Dawn is amazing. She's been fantastic and great. So I don't know if you guys have actually had a chance to look at the Utah Water Marketing Strategies website. So this is our website. It is live now, but we're continuing to like beta build it out and develop it. And then once we're kind of complete with all of our projects, we'll have a big public rollout, but we're kind of adding things as we go. But the statute does require a water banking website to kind of give information out to the public, get out our resources, you know, really get kind of our, you know, the purpose of the project to provide helpful things for people. And so for the last year or so, what we've been doing is really taking what we learned in the various pilot reports and the very pilot projects and trying to synthesize that down to a easy way to talk to people about water banking. And so water banking and really water marketing, because really at the end of the day, what we've learned is that, you know, there's a desire and a need for discussion about more ways to market water than just the Utah Water Banking Act, which is also the goal of the broader statewide strategy. So, well, what you've seen, if you've seen me at any of the conferences in the last couple, you know, months, we've really kind of narrowed down our thinking about water marketing into kind of arranging the conversation around these marketing milestones, you know, people, markets, logistics, transactions, and approvals, and then kind of preparing helpful and useful information for individuals interested in water marketing or water banking to kind of support and help walk through what it means to engage in each one of those 5 milestones. And so, for example, you know, for markets and transactions, you know, some of our working activities are trying to figure out how to explain to water users various kinds of water marketing principles and then kind of transaction types and marketing methods. So here's just a page about principles that kind of talks about market disruptors or why people, you know, do things differently with their water. But one of the fun stuff that we're really excited about is we're getting really down to having brass tacks of helping individuals think about very specific things like, let's see real quickly, open this up. So like different kinds of water marketing transactions and water marketing methods. You know, like if I'm a local water user and I want to put water out on the market, what are my options? You know, what is it that really, how am I actually going to kind of, you know, organize this process so that I actually get wet water from A to B and I get money in my pocket? And so we're really kind of working on some really cool materials, you know, like here's a water marketing method, negotiated agreement, auctions, different kinds of markets, and then different kinds of ways you can actually organize the terms and conditions. And so this is kind of a cross-reference table that we're still working on, but each one of these, on these pages is going to have, we have the content ready, but we're just kind of working with Summer Dawn and her team to put it up. You know, more information on kind of like, here's a draft actual lease, you know, that has like draft terms. So, you know, when you're actually working through this project, you know, if that seems like something that would be good for you, you can actually click on negotiated lease and it would pull up a PDF of like, here's the 8 or 10 terms that typically you'd want in a negotiated lease. And so we're kind of slowly building out the website as we kind of continue to work on our final draft. So that's kind of a bigger overview of where we are. The last year has been kind of the processing stage based on everything we learned on the ground. I anticipate in October we'll tell you a lot more. We'll give you the whole spiel about how everything worked out, but I wanted to let you know that we've been just kind of slowly plugging away in the background, and we're very excited about where we are. So, okay. But for today's immediate concerns, as you remember, the Utah Water Banking Act is an act that was drafted by 75 people. And so we wanted to create the most flexibility possible, and we did that by creating 2 different kinds of water banks. And so our last discussions were water banks that are contract water banks, and basically water users get together, they have a contract, everybody signs off, and then, you know, as long as a public entity is involved, the role of the board was to approve, you know, the application saying, here's the contract. Where we are today is the second form of the water bank. And so I thought it'd be actually most helpful for you guys to actually see the statute, because it really does inform why this form and application looks a little bit different than the last one that you guys saw. So really the purpose of a statutory water bank is to be a legal entity that is organized for the purpose of kind of transacting, you know, putting together willing lessers and willing lessees together. Like they're going to be the bulletin board in the local community, or in the place, the middleman to try and connect people. Whereas a contract is like 5 or 6 parties who all know each other. The purpose of a statutory water bank is to kind of create that little marketplace for unknown parties to come together and have like a way to kind of meet and organize or transact leasing. And they don't necessarily have to be unknown, but like a third-party entity to help with that. So when we drafted the statute, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the fact that because the parties to a contract know what they're signing up for, it's pretty easy just to say, show us your contract, because they're taking the risk of being involved with those parties. For a statutory water bank, it was very important to us when drafting the statute to ensure that we had enough provisions in the statute to say, this is a private entity. It could be an LLC, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a couple different kinds of legal entities. We want to make sure that your governing articles protect the participants in that bank, because we don't want our water users getting taken advantage of. We don't want anyone to have any, question or, be unclear about what the rules of the game are. And so the statutory water bank application is really kind of just like a recipe for what one of these little entities should have in their articles and bylaws. So, or if it's a management agreement, whatever the organic document is for that entity. And so really what the statute is, 202 is the kind of bulk of what's required to be in those documents. And realistically, how we design the statutory water bank application is that outside kind of some of the administrative matters, a little general summary at the top, we really created it so that instead of having, a fillable PDF where you'd put most things in the application itself, we're really anticipating that, we put a bunch of boxes and then we labeled the boxes, and each box is literally just the text of the statute. And so what we anticipate is that the entities will be like, here's an addendum, and they'll say, oh, our section 204 covers our governing board. And then they would attach the documents. Or our section 619 covers the dissolution of the bank, So realistically, the application will be very complete, and we've designed it so it hews specifically to the statute, so that when the division or the board who's delegated that authority to the division reviews it, as long as each one of those boxes has a justifiable connection to their documents, you can sign that as a complete application, because the application itself reflects all of the statutory requirements. So there's as long as it's filled, and the applicant has a good explanation or can refer you to a place in their articles and bylaws, you guys are good to go for approving it. Because at the end of the day, your role as the board is to look for completeness, and once it's complete, it can be approved. So we made great lengths to make this application be very easy. The other thing we did that is very similar to how we did with the contract water bank is we maintained the attorney signature at the end. So the applicant does have to have an attorney sign it to say this application meets the requirements of the law. And so that was another method of us trying to protect, the board from review, in the sense that the applicant really is responsible for stating that they've completed the application to meet all the requirements. But other than that, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's a lot of content, but it's pretty straightforward. It's really, as long as, they have something in every box is designed to meet the statute, and that should be a pretty easy review for the board and the division. Okay. So that's the application form itself. I did want to talk a little bit, just real briefly, about a couple of differences in the process for statutory water banks. But if you guys do have questions on the form before I move on to that. Yeah. Realistically, you're probably going to get like an addendum and then a set of documents. And then like a bunch of maps is what I think. Okay. So similar to the contract water bank application, we also created guidelines for the board. You'll notice I literally, under section 3, clipped the statute, because that's what's required to be in here, and that's what's reflected in the application. So again, it's a lot of content, but that content is the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that they've met it. One thing that's a little bit different about the contract water banks or the statutory water banks. One second. I want to pull up real quick. So here is the guidelines we submitted. You know, after the application comes in, the difference between the contract water bank and the statutory water bank is that in the contract bank application, the applicant is a public entity. And so to avoid, to make it be as local as possible, the public meeting requirements were based on that public entity's schedule. So the local entity called the public meeting, everyone in the area came and made comments, and as long as they demonstrated to the board that meeting was held, you were good to go. So like the board didn't have any public meeting responsibilities. That changes a little bit with the statutory water bank. And what the statute requires is that once the division deems an application complete, division board, within 30 days, they have to post notice of a public meeting, and that public meeting could be one of your regular meetings, you know, like here, where you just provide an opportunity to have comment, or if you wanted to do like a special meeting in the local area, you could call that. But the difference is that, you know, before approval of a statutory water bank application can occur, you need to let 30 days run after that meeting for public comment. And so we kind of put that in the guidelines for you. So that's really the only process difference, is that there's a 30-day public comment period and a public meeting requirement that didn't exist with the contract water bank. It's riveting. This is a riveting conversation about corporate governance. But it's all there. But that's, I mean, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible for you. If you guys have questions, let us know. I anticipate in October we're going to talk more about the broader picture. I do believe we have some public comment, but I'd like to take questions from you guys as well.
Yeah. Do we have any questions? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I've got a question or two. On that 30-day comment period, the board must publish notice. How's that going to logistically occur with this board? Are they gonna, is the staff gonna review it and that type of thing? And then they're gonna go to the chair and the chair will say, yeah, go ahead and publish a notice? Or logistically, how are we going to go about that?
Okay, good questions, and I think that's part of what's covered in the summary report that we prepared and is in the board folder, where the first motion that we're asking for is staff recommends that the board authorize and direct the division to receive, date, determine completeness, and post notice in accordance with the statute. So we're asking you to give us that authority to act on your behalf to at least get the process started. And then the public meeting will have to be a board meeting. And as Emily said, you know, if it seems to not make sense, the length of time between meetings or whatever, we could possibly call a special electronic meeting or something just to address, just to address this, and then allow for the 30 days, you know, to have it at the regular next board meeting or something. We can figure out the timing, but that's why we'd ask that you authorize and direct division staff to do what needs to be done to move through the process of this. You know, statutorily, that's kind of how the code is set up anyway, is that really you all are water resources and we just work for you. So, I mean, that's kind of how statute is set up, is we're authorized to do a lot of the work on your behalf, and then we bring you recommendations of what we think you should do. So that's why our first recommendation would be to ask you to do that. And then our second recommendation is to approve the application and the guidelines with the non-substantive grammar or punctuation things we discussed.
Some capitalization questions. Some capitalization questions.
Well, there was more than that. I said I noticed in one point in the application, it says something about a change to application. Oh. So it's nothing substantive.
Yeah.
But. So that's what we would ask you to do today, so that we can figure out the timing. It's interesting you highlight those 4 paragraphs. Those are exactly the ones that Blaine brought up in the briefing meeting this morning, that that were a question. This brings up kind of an issue of, and it does, it does.
Yeah, there's just some concerns. I've had some input from some of the folks I represent of concern about getting adequate notice and how are, you know, the folks that approached me would like it clarified and have it be a little more specific, but that, what's this, it appears to me this just follows the statutory thing, and it's got to be locally. There are the two, has to be published in a local thing for 2 weeks and the 30-day notice and so on and so forth. I mean, I had some input that they want that clarified a little tighter, but.
Well, we can do, I mean, the statute, so the way that we drafted the statute is we tried to piggyback on the existing notice requirements. So we've actually piggyback on the state engineer's 7336, I think it is. Yeah, 7336 change application process. So it's something very familiar to everybody. So it's 2 weeks in the local newspaper and then on the public notice website. But I do think that, you know, one of the things I think will be interesting is that, you know, at first I was thinking, oh, this will probably come up most regularly at like a regular scheduled board meeting. But the reality is that the people you're probably going to want the most comment from are local folks. And so it might make sense to make some electronic meetings when you get an application and to have, and especially because there's a 30-day comment period afterwards, you know, to have something that's just like a little more specialized. Because if it's advertised just on a regular Board of Water Resources meeting, even if it's really broadly advertised, it may not have the, you know, the gravitas to perk someone's ears to participate.
Good. Any other questions or comments right now? Go ahead. We do have some public comment that we'll go to in just a minute, but.
Before or after?
Let's do it before. If you were getting ready to make a motion, let's go to public comment first.
Okay.
Thank you. So just to double check, did we receive any electronic public comment, Randy Staker?
We did receive one, but he's here in person.
Okay, great. All right, so there's no electronic public comment, but we do have someone here in person. I've got Mr. Goodrich signed up for public comment. Mr. Goodrich, do you want to come up to the table and just please go ahead for the record, just state your name and affiliation, and we're happy to hear your comment. Thanks for joining us in person.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to come. Once again, my name is Ryan Goodrich. I'm the district manager for Ashley Valley Water and Sewer Improvement District out in Vernal, Utah. I really appreciate this process and what we've done. Ashley Valley Water and Sewer partnered with Vernal City about 18 months ago to form a statutory water bank. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ashley Valley area, but I'll give you just a quick rundown. We have 2 water treatment plants. We don't. There are 2 water treatment plants in the area, 1 sewer treatment plant, 4 water districts, 7 canal companies, and 2 major water storage reservoirs. So there's a lot going on in our little valley, and when the legislation came out about water banking, we were very excited because we saw this as being potential solutions, but also allowing the most efficient water use by all of the different entities. And so we chose to try and pursue a statutory water bank. We've been actively trying to prepare for the last 18 months. We were ready for an application in February, and we've been just kind of putting things in and getting things ready. And so today's agenda was very exciting to see that there's finally an application. We anticipate submitting that application in the next week, maybe 2 weeks. We're that prepared. And then we can go through the process and look forward to hopefully final approvals with this board. We'd like to thank everybody involved, Emily and staff, and everybody who's been helping us with this process. We are very excited and think it'll be beneficial for our community. So thank you.
I just want to highlight really quickly how special Ashley Valley is, because we were about to end this project without having a statutory water bank. And so we went through all the discussions in the Snyderville Basin, and ultimately it didn't prove to be the right fit. So we learned a lot about how to get people to understand what was happening in that process. But they stepped up to the plate and really have kind of like slid under the wire, and we are going to have a great application, and we've learned a lot. And honestly, this form is reflective of our work with them and trying to get something that actually works on the ground for the people using it.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we appreciate your enthusiasm, and thanks for being here in person. And I think we're just about to get to the point where we'll likely have that application ready for you. So thank you for all the work you're doing, and we're excited to take a look at it.
Thank you.
If there's no other comment or question I would be looking for.
Excuse me.
Oh,
Can
yeah,
I,
go ahead.
just before
Yes.
you
Thank you,
move,
Shalane.
I just want to say thank you so much to Emily Lewis She's been awesome. It's been her passion. Some of you know Jacqueline was working on this before she left the division. And when she left, it was like, oh, what's happening now? But Emily was the one who kept things seamless. And yeah, when Ashley Valley came in and said, hey, we think we want to do this, she jumped right on it. She started working with them. Well, this is what you're going to have to do. This is what you're going to have. And honestly, I think her work with them has helped prepare these forms so that we can move forward in the future. So thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
We have lots of exciting stuff to show you guys.
Good. Thank you. Well, so well said, Shalane, and I think we just echo your thanks. Thank you so much. All right.
Madam Chair, I will make the motion that the board, my first motion, that the board authorize and direct the Division of Water Resources to receive, date, determine completeness, and post notice of statutory water bank applications in accordance with Utah Code 73-31-203.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, seconded by Board Member Stevens. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, that first motion passes, and the Division of Water Resources is authorized to do those things as encompassed in the motion by Board Member Holmgren. We'd be looking for a second motion then.
Madam Chair, I will make the motion that the board adopt the application and guidelines for the statutory water banks as written.
Thank
And I'll second that.
And modified by grammatical changes.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
correct. My motion should include any minor grammatical corrections.
All right, thank you. So moved by Board Member Holmgren that we adopt the application and guidelines for statutory water banks, allowing for non-substantive changes. And I think that was seconded by Board Member Van Horn. Is there any discussion to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the application and guidelines have been approved. Thank you. Like I said, we're excited to see the application. Okay.
And peruse the website while you're at it.
Yes, I'm actually excited about that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, appreciate you. All right, let's go ahead and move into the director's report. Director Hassan-Yeager.
Great, thank you. So I was looking at our current water storage statewide, and we're out at about 81% of capacity, and comparing this to last year when we were about 50%. I think we're all still feeling pretty good, but I just was like, oh, that's a good thing when we've been talking about how low water levels have been. This week was interim week, and so we were pretty active on the Hill. On Monday, there was a Legislative Water Development Commission meeting where I was able to give a presentation on they wanted to know of the 2023 water bills that have been passed, give us an update on them. So I went through that. A couple of highlights for you that I wanted to cover with SB 76, which was titled Water Amendments. We received some one-time money for helping to integrate land use and water planning and providing technical assistance, as well as we got one staff position. We are currently in the process of trying to get that position posted so we can hire them. Another kind of study item that was in the legislature this year was SB 34, which was water infrastructure funding study. It provided the Department of Natural Resources $200,000 to do this study, and Joel Ferry looked at me and he said, "You're doing that," and I said, "Okay." So with the Utah Water Task Force, we formed a work group, and we have been meeting throughout the summer. And we kind of coalesced around developing a scope of work and getting that it was posted. And so that'll be open for 3 weeks, and then we'll have a small search or a small team review team that will review any applications that come in for that RFP, and we'll look to get that started. We do have to have that completed by October 2024. I think it was October. So we have some kind of earlier deadlines to get some drafts. Our work group is quite engaged and want to stay engaged throughout the process. This is not something they want the consultant just to go and do and then come back with an answer. So as part of the scope of services, we asked for kind of a facilitation kind of part of it to get the work group involved in it. We had a little bit of discussions at lunch about cloud seeding. This last year, there was a $12 million one-time appropriation and $5 million ongoing. That was newly appropriated money. So compared to previously, the board had committed $350,000 annually with a local cost share of about the same amount. This is a great expansion in our cloud seeding budget. Last year, this last winter, we were able to complete an aerial cloud seeding program in southern Utah that began in November of 2022. I haven't seen the final report of that analysis, but we are expecting that probably within the next month or so. We've also been working on building 20 new remote operated cloud seeding generators. We did get 2 put in the field this last winter, but we're working on getting those other ones done. In 2024, we have a goal of getting another 40 done. So this is through hiring our contractor to do that. We're also looking at new areas to cloud seed. There's opportunities potentially in the La Salle range, in the Baja range. So we'll look at additional areas. We're also looking at expanding the aerial program into northern Utah. We're going to hire a cloud seeding coordinator because as magical as Jake is, he needs some help with this one. And then as many of you saw probably in your emails and invitations, we're holding a cloud seeding symposium on September 28th to try to educate and inform people about what cloud seeding is or isn't, like you need clouds to actually cloud seed, those type of things, but also bring in experts from across the cloud seeding world and, well, probably not really world, Western United States. We'll have some experts come in and also have additional discussions about that. And then Utah Waterways. So this is a newly created public-private partnership nonprofit. The legislature appropriated $2 million one time, $1 million ongoing to promote and educate on water conservation, and the optimal use of water. I would say that we're starting off, and I'll be really excited. We've had one board meeting. We have another scheduled next week. I have been helping to lead this effort while we've been looking for an executive director. We were able to post the position for executive director. We had 31 applicants, and now we're having interviews this Friday. And I look forward to having that person come on board and take over this job, because I feel like I'm doing a couple jobs right now. And then as part of our water efficiency landscaping efforts, you've heard some updates. We've had about, since the program launched, so just as a reminder, we had $5 million last year, $5 million this legislative session with $3 million ongoing. So we have about $13 million right now. And we have launched the program in May of 2023. We have over 2,100 applications so far. One of the requirements is that cities adopt water efficiency standards for new development, and we went from having maybe 5 cities statewide that had adopted those to having over 40. So it's a program that people are interested in and residents are interested in. So that has been really interesting, kind of a fun time, and my team's been doing a great amount of work to get that out. Additional presentations I give, and I'll just quickly go over these, was on the Water Development Coordinating Council, which you may not be familiar with, because what we do is we have each of the water boards, so representatives, so myself, Tim Davis for the Drinking Water Board, John Mackey for the Water Quality Board, Candace from CIB, the Community Impact Board, state treasurer, and then we also have a new member from UDAF, Jim Bocut's on that council, where we just talk about the different boards, the different funding, the applications that come before multiple boards, and just trying to coordinate and determine kind of the needs there. So I was able to provide an update on that. I was also asked to give an update on the salinity control program funding fix, which I will cover in just a little bit, give you more details about that when I talk about Colorado River. And then we also, as we discussed at lunch, had an accountable budget review. So the legislative fiscal analyst looked at our conservation and development fund and our revolving construction fund, and their big recommendations after reviewing our funds was your code could be cleaned up. Like, we have 5 different sections pointing to different areas, so we will continue to work with LFA and also likely try to get a sponsor to help us clean up the code associated with these different loan programs. So that was generally the items that we covered at the interim this week. A couple of other things to note. The Agricultural Water Optimization Committee has started meeting. They had their first meeting last month, and we have our next meeting, and I'm on this committee as well. But we have our next meeting on Friday, tomorrow, so that's coming up. As far as watershed councils, we have as of July 13th, the Bear River Watershed Council received full certification to become a watershed council. The Weber Watershed Council and Utah Lake Watershed Council were also certified. And there's ongoing efforts to organize the West Desert Watershed Council, the Great Salt Lake Watershed Council, and others, with Uinta Basin Watershed Council being at the top of the list. So working to get all of those councils formed. Just real quick. So then a couple other things regarding Colorado River and Great Salt Lake. So with the Colorado River, you guys probably remember the Bureau of Reclamation really paused their 2007 interim guidelines for their supplemental EIS process because they had an additional submittal from the lower basin. Pretty much the lower basin didn't care for the 2 alternatives that were listed in the draft EIS. And so they submitted their own. Right now, the Bureau is in the process of analyzing those. And then we are anticipating on seeing a new draft SEIS out within the next couple of months. As far as from the Upper Basin states perspective, we didn't necessarily recommend the Lower Basin states alternative because we didn't have anything to compare it to. We hadn't seen the analysis yet, but we thought it would be good to include as part of it and to analyze it. So we're waiting for that. Also, the Bureau of Reclamation had their notice of intent regarding the EIS for the post-2026 operations. So these are comments, so this is like, what are we going to do after 2026? We know that the 2007 interim guidelines expire in 2026, so how are we going to operate these 2 reservoirs after the fact? Comments are due for this kind of notice of intent August 15th. And the Colorado River Authority, the Utah Colorado River Authority, as well as many others of the Upper Basin states and Lower Basin states are working hard to get to some consensus on a 7-state letter. And then it is also my understanding we'll have an Upper Basin state letter, and then each of the states will likely write their own letter. So there's going to be like 3 states or 3 letters, maybe from each state. I don't know. So it'll be fun, and I know they're working hard to get that done. So as far as, and this is, like I said, I gave a whole presentation on the salinity control program and the funding issues. But one of the things that has happened with this, so there's the salinity control program that has programs through existing federal entities, like the Bureau of Reclamation has their basin-wide program where they're really looking at funding off-farm programs or efficiency programs, so lining canals, piping, anything off-farm. And then the NRCS has their EQIP program where they're doing on-farm efficiencies, typically moving from flood to pivot systems or those type of things. So right now with the salinity control program, the federal government funds kind of a piece of it, and then the basin states through either the upper basin fund or the lower basin fund have an obligation to fund additional projects. One of the tricky things that's happened is as we have seen the drought from the last 23 years decrease the elevations in Lake Powell and Lake Mead, it's also, as you guys know, reduced power generation, which that is one of the major contributors to the basin funds. And so we've done these kind of long-term projections of with these declining power revenues and this obligation that we're kind of getting this deficit, this pretty big deficit. And so Senator Bennett he introduced some language to the Senate Ag Committee to help address this by reducing the EQIP cost share, kind of our obligation from, it used to be a 70-30 split and changing it to an 85-15. So now the basin funds only have to come up with 15% of it for other projects. And then also change some of the operation and maintenance. So it's a very kind of complicated, and it's lots of federal terminology and budgeting. I'm happy to go into it more, but we are supportive of this legislation and have worked with Senator Romney's office co-sponsored this legislation that came out, and we're working on the House side to get a sponsor as well. So the other thing I would note on the Colorado River side is the drought response operations agreement. So the 2024 plan has been finalized, and it's all geared toward recovery. So there was 588,000 acre feet that was released from Flaming Gorge to Lake Powell over the last couple of years. Right now, approximately, well, as of June 30th, approximately 311,000 has been recovered, and we're working to get the rest of it recovered in Flaming Gorge, and it's estimated by February of 2024 to be whole again in Flaming Gorge. And then real quick, as far as Great Salt Lake, I just wanted you guys to be aware, we did get a request from the Bureau of Reclamation to provide feedback on how to use the remainder of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act provided the Bureau of Reclamation a big chunk of money, like $8 billion with a B, with a lot of money, and $4 billion of it was geared toward going toward what they called, what did they say? To mitigate the efforts of ongoing drought in reclamation states with priority given to Colorado River Basin states and other basins experiencing comparable levels of long-term drought. So the Bureau's been working hard to put the Colorado River side of the money to work, but now they're trying to say, well, we got this other kind of pot for these other areas that have been drought stricken. How we want your feedback on how to implement that. So we are working with the commissioner of the Great Salt Lake Commissioner to come up with a plan to send to the Bureau next week of what we think they should do with it. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that as we're kind of going through that. And I think I covered all of the things I had, but happy to answer any questions. Kyle.
The comment that you just made about the additional money, does that have the same strings attached as the ARPA funds where it has to be spent by 2026?
That's a really great question. I don't believe so. I can verify that though, but my understanding is the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, did not have the same 2026 strings.
Right. That was quite the update. Thank
Sorry,
you.
there's
No,
a
please
lot
don't
going
apologize,
on.
but you're juggling a lot in your world, and we enjoy hearing about all of the pieces and how they fit together. So thank you. Any other questions for?
Yeah. What do you do in your spare time?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this last weekend I went and rode my horse, so that was
Good.
pretty awesome.
We hope you get to do more of that. Well, we appreciate it, and of course, just keep us in the loop and let us know how we can be helpful to everything that you and the team are working on. Let's go ahead and move over to our final agenda item. As I mentioned, we will not be going into closed session for this agenda item. Marisa will just be providing us with a briefing on potential property exchange or sale, and conferring with our Attorney General, we determined that this does not need to go into closed session, and so we'll look forward to the briefing. And I will just note, as we set this up, that there's no the division is is going to give us a briefing, so we are aware of what's happening, and I think they're looking for some guidance from us. But there's no need for formal action. Formal action is not called for on this item, and so we won't be taking any sort of formal action.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. When you said that about Candace, I leaned over to Shalane and said, and we're just living in it. So it's Candace world, and we're just living in it. So she and Queen Bee are doing great. So just kind of to catch up, there's 3 new board members, and to make you aware that the Division of Water Resources was tasked back in 1991 through the Bear River Development Act to plan, study Bear River development. And over the years, it's gone from, in 1991, expecting the need to be in 2015, 8 years ago. And now we're looking at 2050 and beyond. And so one thing that we are working on, the last study we did was in 2019, is we're trying to do some corridor preservation for a large diameter pipeline. Particularly right now we're focused more on the Box Elder County area, but we're also looking some in the Weaver County area as well. We're trying to stay ahead of development. We don't want to buy houses. We want to buy undeveloped land, and that segues into this. So so you are reminded or aware, the board committed $5 million for right-of-way acquisition for corridor preservation for Bear River development. The concern is to preserve potential corridors to stay ahead of the development. The board also authorized the division to purchase and manage properties without the board's direct approval. When a property has been purchased, we do come back to the board and board meeting, and we report those purchases. However, today we do want to discuss with the board the potential of selling of the 3 of these properties. And as part of preservation for the potential right-of-ways, the division is only purchasing based on willing seller, willing buyer. And the focus right now has been in Box Elder County. Additionally, the focus is on purchasing undeveloped properties. However, 3 of the properties that we have do have residents on them. We don't necessarily need the homes. Well, we don't need the homes, just easements for a potential corridor. We are considering selling these 3 properties, and I hope I get their name right, Division of Parks. Is that the right name? Okay, the Division of Parks is interested in purchasing the houses for residences for the Willard Bay State Park staff. Rather than trailers that they've been on in the park. And this is in the Willard area, so it's right nearby the state park. And I was going to turn some time over to Candace to talk a little bit more.
Great. So I had a conversation with Director Rasmussen from State Parks, and we've been talking with his staff about these properties. They're currently leasing one property.
Correct.
Where I guess leasing is a generous term, but they're maintaining
it for us.
Yeah, they're maintaining it and staying in it. So we already have one of the properties that their staff is using as a residence.
That is not one of these 3 that were today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And we have these 3 additional properties, and Director Rasmussen said, well, if you would sell them to us at pretty much what you paid for, what they appraised at when you purchased them, we'd be interested in it. But if you are trying to sell them at whatever the market rate is today, then we're probably not interested. We're not looking to buy houses for our staff. We want to more focus on investing in our people, let's say it that way, through their wages and those type of things. And so he asked, are you required to like his statute requires him to make money and to do certain things. And he's like, does your statute require you? And I said, well, at the end of the day, these are board funds that have been authorized for this purpose, and whatever we sell them back at, it'll be a benefit to your funds. And so I wanted to bring this back to you for discussion on and provide direction on how to go about that. Did I cover anything else you want me to
And
cover?
if I can just give a little bit more information, the 3 houses all were appraised in early 2020. And one of them was purchased later that year. And that all 3, the sellers stayed in the home for a while they built another home. And so, and rented back from us, leased back from us. So 2 of those homes, we have done what's called a comparative market analysis on it. We haven't done another appraisal on it. And the Division of Facilities and Construction Management, DFCM, has been helping us with this because they have real estate, they have realtors that can help us with these. So they ran a market analysis on 2 of these homes, and there was and that was the beginning of this year. So we're now talking 3 years down the road from when the original appraisal, and it was about an 8 to 9% increase. There was one home that we did sell on the market, and it also sold at about an 8% increase to what the appraisal was. So that's all kind of falling within that 8 to 9% over a 2 to 3 year period. One thing to note is that the plan on these 3 homes is we can put an easement on it. And if we do put an easement on it with the idea, is particularly a construction easement or even the pipeline going through that west side of the property, because it butts up against the railroad, which goes along I-15, we don't know what that amount would be, but we are anticipating that there'd be a decrease in property value. So we could run an appraisal with that idea, and we would expect it to be lower. The CMAs do not, those comparative market analysis do not include the idea of having an easement on it. So talking to Candace about it and us talking back and forth, she felt it'd be important to bring that to the board to get some guidance on what we should do on this.
Madam Chairman, I just had a few
Yeah, please.
a
This
few
is kind of your area
questions.
of expertise, so it's good to have you lean in. Thank you.
Yeah, so is there any specific policy that we know of? I know we've got a member of the AG here with us today. Is there any policy that we have of a disposal of property or sell of property, of how we have to follow that at all?
In the Bear River Development Act, there is none.
Okay,
The Bear River
but as
Development-
far as like our
yeah,
agency,
and the
do we?
division does not. Marty.
That's one of my, I got a few others, but that was the first question.
Thank you. Marty Bushman with the Utah Attorney General's office. In the DNR's code, there is a provision that says that each department will enact rules to ensure that when property is sold, they get a congruent value. And those rules are to help design what congruency means and how you do that. I tried to check through the department's rules. I didn't see that they had done that, but we do have a statute on the books saying that we ought to be getting some kind of fair return for what we sell this. I think by the time that we put, if there's an easement put on this for a pipeline potentially, or construction for a pipeline to go through it, that will have a measurable impact on its value and bring this closer. And we've also had a few years of depreciation of homes that, haven't had active maintenance. I mean, we've tried to upkeep them the best we can.
Yeah.
But nobody's been living in them. Is that correct? No, they have had people.
They've been empty for a bit, but they were
Okay.
living in for a while.
Marisa, will you just to put that on the record?
So I think we'll just, we're going to move through with that thought in mind as we're trying to figure out how to get congruent value.
Sure.
Marisa, go ahead and restate.
Yeah, sorry. The sellers did live in them for different periods of time. I can't remember exactly when they moved out. The one that does not have the comparative market analysis moved out earlier this year. So I know on one home when we purchased it, they were still, the two homes that have the market analysis are quite young, a few years old. They were still working on it, building it, and they stopped. So you go downstairs and there's a lot of posts and, where they were gonna do something. The other thing that DFCM noted is that there would be no real estate agent fees if we did it across agencies, which would also be an additional cost that would have to be part of selling.
And to be clear, it would not actually be across agents. It's all within the Department of Natural Resources, or is Parks out, right? So it's all under the banner of Department of Natural Resources. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct, yes.
So Madam Chair, just a question there for Marty. So is the grantee, the current grantee of record, is that the DNR or is that the Division of Water Resource?
I believe it's the Division of Water Resources.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, the deeds are under the Division of Water Resources.
So what my thought is, Marty kind of referenced, it looks like that we're supposed to have a policy. What I would recommend is if we put together a policy, so in case for some reason that we encounter something like this again, I just need to put for the record, I have no idea where this is. That's an area of the state that I don't know a whole lot about. But I think it would be good if we could put together a disposal process there. And then the next thing is, quite familiar with CMAs versus appraisals, and I think it would be good to get an MAI appraisal done on each of these properties. They're not that expensive, and I don't know timeline. Every region of the state's different, but our region for an MAI appraiser's typically a couple of weeks, two and a half weeks to get an appraisal, and I think that's.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that's really going to be the best way to make an adjustment backing out of what that easement would be. But one thing that we might want to consider is maybe instead of holding back the easement just because of any environmental clearances or otherwise, if there's federal regulation that changes or state regulation that changes in the future, that the difference between us having fee simple ownership of that property versus an easement to get the permitting to go through there. It would be a lot easier if we actually own the property versus had an easement, even if we have, full, construction rights, maintenance rights, all of the golden rule rights as a beneficiary of the easement. It would still be better to hold fee simple to the property. So one thing that maybe look at there, Marty, is because I don't want to give legal advice to the that's your role, but is to maybe look and see if we were to do a partition to subdivide off. I know that there's, just from memory, I think that there's some exceptions for this type of a situation where we wouldn't have to go to the local land use authority to subdivide, and then to create a separate parcel of the boundary that we need to hold, and then we could still relinquish off the houses, to the parks and do something like that, but then we still maintain fee title. So.
And I really think all those options are still on the table. We're kind of in the early stages of looking through this and wanted to give input to the board on it, but I think our object will be is to secure the best interest we can for what we need it for, and and to get something done that will help out the Division of Parks and Recreation, but at the same time make sure we're whole. And that'll be our objective as we work through this.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, that's just my thoughts. I don't know, I'm just one member of the board here, but would look to, get other suggestions. But I think that at least my position, I think that would be the best route to go. And then, maybe perhaps in our policy, that we create prior to, to doing any kind of a transaction, maybe that there's a special consideration out there for third-party disposal of property versus, other agencies within the department, something like that, an exception, so that, we can we can also try to help them out, and still accomplish our goals of maintaining ownership of what we need, so.
Also, you know, heretofore, I don't believe the division has been in the property business a lot, where you're buying it.
We
And
have
so-
not.
Hence no rule or anything on it. But now with some of this new stuff, you know, there may be some prudence, especially if there's more properties we want to dispose of, is to create a policy that would give us the flexibility, you know, to make these transactions and stay compliant with statute.
I mean, one thing, the last thing I'll say is just, you know, again, I don't know this area, but, you know, just like what you said, Marty, there might be other places where, you know, we have to buy the whole parcel, and the whole parcel might be, you know, 180 acres, and we only need like 7 acres. And so, you know, something like that, we may encounter this a fair amount. When this was first brought up a few minutes ago, I was kind of surprised we were looking, one, that we own property, and then number two is that we were looking to relinquish, but this now makes sense. But this could be something that we encounter quite a bit if we are trying to acquire a corridor. So.
And I know that Division of Wildlife Resources made a rule based on this, and we're quite creative in kind and different things that they could maybe take less than appraised value if there was other values they were getting out of it. And so we wouldn't necessarily be starting from scratch in writing a rule. I think we could draw from the ideas on that rule and then make a rule that best fits water resources needs.
Madam Chair, just not to torpedo the idea, which sounds pretty practical, but in Box Elder County, my 125-year-old home increased in value about 30-something% from last year to this year. So that's what I saw, my property tax notice. My land value didn't go up, it's just the home.
Nice.
Well, in Summit County, they reassess every year. They have been.
My property tax notice tells me that I should get an appraisal if I want to refinance, because if the bank looks at that, I won't get anything. And if I may kind of talk to and just give a little more background and context, Spencer, Board Member Jones, I really appreciate your thoughts on this. We actually have bought strips of land off of very large peach farm, a cherry farm, and we actually are leasing it back to them so that we didn't have to rip out any trees. And so they're leasing, so we have a lease agreement with them that they can continue to work it. But it is fee simple, and that is always our preference. The hard part with houses, and particularly these houses, is we might have to clip off part of a house, and there's not a lot of space, and so then it begs the question, you know, how much we would. The hard part is also subdividing. They've got their particular, I think it's half acre up there, and Willard City. I think these all fall within Willard City. Willard City knows very well the project UTA's going through as well, and we had originally partnered with them. They're not interested in having subdivisions going on like that. So that's one of the things that we've kind of run into, so.
We might want to just, you know, maybe Marty look into, because if I remember right, there was some exceptions to the requirement of the formal subdivision process.
State properties generally not subject to you know, city and county zoning, but it doesn't make friends very well. When
I think that's what UTA's been.
And we kind of push that down their throat, and so
yeah.
I think the big lesson is homes are quite a different animal, into you know, because of trying to maintain them, and I think we're going to try to get out of that business and avoid trying to get residential lots and stick with unimproved land that we can buy in fee. And but on the interim, we're going to, you know, try to figure out how we could maybe make the best of this. And I have not had a lot of time to kind of think of different ideas, but I mean, there's possibilities of joint ownership, you know, between parks and that, and just have an agreement who's going to manage what side of the property. And I have not had a lot of discussions with parks to kind of know what would even be willing to them. But I think at this point, there's a lot of different options. But what is really important for you to know is that state parks may be the entity that we're going to try to negotiate with and see what we can come up with.
I'll take chair's prerogative to put my personal thoughts on the record. So again, just from where, and again, I'm just kind of learning about this today and needing some time to process it. But my initial intuition for myself is that I don't have, just from the policy question, and I will lean on you all to make the pieces work together. And then also we have some expertise on the board that hopefully can help advise there. But just from the policy perspective of, if there has been an increase in value in these properties, and again, I think maybe having the appraisals would be helpful because there's magnitudes of value. But if there has been an increase, even there, I don't have a lot of heartburn on. I see this really as, we're the state, and even further, it's the state's asset, and really it's the department's asset, and so I don't have a lot of heartburn with what you're proposing, where we basically would be transferring or exchanging or selling, whatever term we want to use, to another division within the department, given that it's being put to good use for the state, especially in the magnitudes that we're kind of hearing. Again, I think it would be good to have the appraisals just to really validate that the magnitudes are kind of in this 9-10%, potentially even lower than that, given some of the issues with the value. But just from a policy perspective, I don't have a lot of heartburn. Now, if we were talking about selling to an entity outside of the state for the original appraised value of when we purchased them, that's where I would have more heartburn, but that's just me personally where I am. I'm not sure how others feel, but I think that the department's looking for some direction from a policy, on the policy level. Does anyone have any sort of concern with pursuing?
The division is looking for that.
Yeah, sorry, department division. Now I'm
might say,
is
there any kind of opposition to selling the homes, period?
Yeah, go
That would
ahead.
be kind of a-
Yeah, if I might add, I guess I'm not opposed to selling them for fair value, but I think we need to be very cautious. I remember vividly the discussions we had of why we needed those properties, why with the homes where they were, the homes would encroach right there, and the homes might have to be demolished even in some places to get it. And I remember the discussions when we purchased those properties for a fairly expensive amount of money, I thought, at least from the area that I live in, several $100,000, $400,000 or $500,000. I think we need to be very, very cautious about giving our fee title up on something that we may need down the future, and if we need it in 10 years, it may cost us 10 times the amount if we give it up. And the decisions were made that we thought we would need those properties at the time. So I guess I would just urge caution.
That's good. Any other comments or questions?
I have a
All
small
right.
one.
We'll go to Board Member Van Horn and then Board Member Davis. Yeah.
You mentioned that the Parks Department is leasing another house that's independent of these three. Did you discuss leasing these other houses to them with the same arrangement, or
No.
they just came up with the buying it?
No, that was us. I mentioned to them something about, can you go mow some lawns for us?
Right.
So that I don't have to. And they said, oh, you have more houses. And so they brought it up, and basically when they first talked to me, I said, I don't think we want to keep sitting on houses for the price we paid, because the other one is a lease, and so that's what we kind of talked about with Candace to start with. So, we could have that discussion as well. The home that they're leasing is a little more critical to the potential corridor because it's immediately east of Willard Bay, and we cannot be on the west side of Willard Bay. We can't be between Willard Bay and I-15. The other three houses are further south. They weren't our top right-of-way, but we were partnering at the time with UTA, and we thought, okay, we'll look on both the west and the east side. We are no longer partnering with UTA through that section. And also just the concern that we don't necessarily have what we need that UTA and say a UDOT has with right-of-way departments. And there were some other things that went into feeling like we had to purchase the homes. And so these 3 homes actually are on the east side where we originally want to be on the west side where there's no development going on, the west side of I-15. So that's part of why these 3 houses were like, you know, we felt more comfortable saying we don't really, you know, now that we're not partnering with UTA, we probably won't, we're not looking necessarily to go on the east side of I-15 south of Willard Bay. That's where we felt like perhaps selling would be best.
And I guess just as if we're all given our personal feelings about this, you know, I have a hard time when public entities want to dispose of properties. It just seems to me like you're giving away something you'll never get back, and it could be useful, and it's really not costing you any money. However, I draw the line at public entities owning homes and having their staff go mow the lawn. If that's, you know, if it was going to be an apartment building for affordable housing for somebody, or however that works, not this department or this division, it's just not in your scope, and you're already taxed out work-wise and staff-wise, as it were, and it's just being in the house business isn't, I agree with the previous comments, it's just not where you guys should be to own that. So
Thank you.
And I also think that it benefits the taxpayers of the state and people here to keep that under that same umbrella and roof that we talked about, to minimize the expenses and have another department benefit from it.
Great, thank you. Board Member Davis.
Thank you. My experience is mostly local government, and in local government we were able to work deals with sister agencies and departments and things because, as was mentioned, it's the same taxpayer that really put the funds up to purchase the properties, and so we worked with that. But I guess I feel a little bit like being very cautious to dispose of any properties that have been purchased. But on the other hand, could we fabricate a deal with parks that they maintained the property for the ability to live in it, some type of a deal? But there's a value associated. If it ends up we don't need the property down the road 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's probably more valuable with the homes on it than it is with the homes removed, because it would be in a potential subdivision anyway. But those are just some thoughts, and honestly, not knowing more details than this, I probably don't have any other thoughts, but those, thank you.
Thank you. I think this is kind of what the division was looking like. Do you feel like you kind of have some general kind of sentiment coming from the board? And I guess it sounds like
we need to order some appraisals.
That's what, yeah. Maybe some appraisals, and then potentially looking at just the gamut of options.
And I do love the idea of getting that disposal policy written up in our rules and having it just so when these things come up, we have some guidance to it. So really appreciate your thoughts and your feedback there. Thank you.
And if I may, on the appraisal, the appraiser that UTA used happened to be the same appraiser that DFCM was using also. And so it's not only the same company, but the same person. And so I am sure that we can get him again. He already did the other 3 appraisals, and so it'll be easier in that regard. It won't be brand new, fresh to him, so he'll know what's going on.
Great. All right, well, thank you, and we'll look forward to, I guess, the continued updates on this. Well, with that, I think we're probably ready for a final motion. All right. I guess I think we need a second. We got a second by Board Member Ibsen. All in favor? Aye. All right. Good meeting, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you all in Garden City. Sounds good. Yeah.